Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an event that literally remapped the global landscape and completely changed the course of human history. We are talking about the birth of the United States of America. Think about this. Just 250 years ago, this completely disjointed group of 13 colonies somehow managed to defeat the absolute most powerful empire on the planet, the British Empire. And it wasn't just a military victory, right? It was a massive war of ideas fought with sweat, blood, and tears. So how on earth did a group of farmers and merchants manage to pull off the impossible? Well, let's dive into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the start of the rebellion, move on to declaring independence, hit the turning point, cover the final victory, and wrap up with building a new nation.
So let's jump straight into Chapter 1, the start of the rebellion.
You know, the seeds of this American Revolution actually began with an entirely different conflict. Back in 1754, Britain and France got into this massive 9-year conflict over control of North America, the French and Indian War. By 1763, the Treaty of Paris ends that war with a big British victory, completely wiping out French dominance in North America. But here was the problem. Britain had spent an absolute fortune to win it, and the British Parliament decided, well, since the war was fought to protect the American colonists, those colonists needed to foot the bill. So they totally abandoned their previous free trade policies and started slapping these heavy taxes on the colonies. A big one was the Stamp Act of 1765, which taxed newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards.
Which brings us to this iconic rally cry: no taxation without representation. The colonists were absolutely furious. And it's important to understand, the core grievance wasn't just about the money itself. It was the fact that there was not a single American representative sitting in the British Parliament over in London. They firmly believed that without a voice, without representation, London had zero right to tax them.
Moving on to Chapter 2, declaring independence. So how exactly did we get from angry protests over taxes to an all-out war? Well, when tensions finally boiled over, it was the ultimate David versus Goliath matchup. Literally. On one side, you have the British Empire, the world's most disciplined, heavily funded, deadliest military with total naval supremacy. On the other side, the Americans, completely untrained farmers, merchants, and workers with virtually no equipment and zero formal military structure. I mean, the odds were incredibly stacked against them. Because they didn't have a formal army, the Americans had to rely on everyday citizens known as Minutemen. These were civilians who independently organized, self-trained with whatever weapons they had, and promised to be ready to fight at, you guessed it, a minute's notice. This grassroots everyday citizen militia was literally the only defense the colonies had.
The breaking point finally hits on April 19, 1775, at the battles of Lexington and Concord. British troops marched out to seize a colonial weapon stash, and it led to a tragic confrontation. The first shots were fired, leaving 8 Americans dead, but it officially sparked a full-scale war.
Over 1,000. That is the massive number of casualties the newly formed Continental Army inflicted on the British in June 1775 at the Battle of Bunker Hill in Breeds Hill. Even though these Americans were largely untrained, they went toe-to-toe with the world's deadliest military and proved they could actually fight. Driven by the fierce, persuasive writings of Thomas Paine, who argued that it was just unnatural for a tiny island to rule a massive continent, the colonies realized there was no turning back. So, a committee, led by a 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson, drafted one of the most powerful political documents in human history, drawing heavily on philosophers like John Locke. It declared that all men are created equal, endowed with natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, crucially, it stated that the people actually have a right to overthrow a government that destroys those rights. Congress officially adopted it on July 4, 1776. Which takes us to Chapter 3, the turning point. Now, declaring independence and actually securing it, those are two very different things. And by late 1776, things were looking incredibly grim. The British had sent this massive armada of 32,000 troops to New York. The Continental Army, led by George Washington, was suffering crushing defeats and was forced to retreat endlessly through the freezing New Jersey winter. Sensing the entire revolution was on the verge of collapse, Thomas Paine wrote The American Crisis. He wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country.
Washington actually had those exact words read aloud to his starving, freezing troops just to rebuild their shattered morale. Knowing they couldn't just keep retreating forever, Washington planned a miraculous, frankly audacious, tactical move. On Christmas night, 1776, he led his men across the freezing, icy Delaware River. They marched toward Trenton in the freezing dawn, launched a total surprise attack on sleeping Hessian mercenaries, and captured over 900 troops. And here's the crazy part. They did it with 0 American combat deaths. This brilliant, desperate maneuver breathed life right back into the dying revolution. But the true turning point of the whole war came a bit later, in October 1777, at the Battle of Saratoga in New York. American forces completely surrounded and defeated British General John Burgoyne, forcing him to surrender over 6,000 troops. This specific victory was absolutely crucial. It was the ultimate proof of concept. It proved to the watching world that this ragged American army could actually defeat a major British force in a conventional battle. Chapter 4: The Final Victory. That proof of concept at Saratoga immediately transformed this local colonial rebellion into a massive global conflict, because suddenly European superpowers smelled blood in the water. France, who had been secretly sending money, officially declared war on Britain, supplying America with massive funds, a powerful navy, modern weapons, and highly trained troops. Spain jumped in too, putting heavy military pressure on the British in Florida and along the Mississippi River. Even the Dutch Republic chipped in with crucial secret loans and trade. Britain suddenly had to fight a global war, scattering their troops to defend other territories like the Caribbean and Gibraltar. This perfect storm all culminated at the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. The British general Lord Cornwallis had set up a base on the coast of Virginia, totally expecting British ships to supply him. But George Washington and French General Rochambeau rushed down and surrounded the city by land. Meanwhile, the French Navy under Admiral de Grasse blockaded the Chesapeake Bay by sea, completely driving off the British rescue ships. Cornwallis was cornered, trapped, and relentlessly bombarded. He was eventually forced to surrender his 8,000 troops, which effectively ended major military operations. Following 2 long years of complex peace negotiations, the war finally legally came to an end on September 3, 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. Great Britain officially recognized the United States as a free, sovereign, and independent nation, granting them a massive expanse of land from the Atlantic Ocean all the way out to the Mississippi River. They had actually won. But as they were about to find out, their biggest challenge was actually just beginning. Which brings us to our final chapter, building a new nation. See, winning the war was one thing, but figuring out how to run a country of 13 very distinct independent states, that is entirely different. We call this the Builder's Dilemma. Their very first attempt at a government was called the Articles of Confederation, and because they were terrified of creating another tyrannical king, they purposely made the central government incredibly weak. It had no power to collect taxes, no national army, and states were even printing their own separate currencies. Naturally, the economy crashed, leading to chaos like Shays' Rebellion, where armed, debt-ridden farmers literally started shutting down courts. Realizing the whole country was on the verge of civil war, delegates met again in 1787 in Philadelphia. Thanks largely to James Madison, the father of the Constitution, they drafted a brilliant new framework. The new Constitution created a strong central government with a unified economy and legal system, while still protecting the rights of the individual states. Under this new stability, George Washington became the nation's first president in 1789. The sheer scale and drama of this history is absolutely incredible. And honestly, we've only scratched the surface today. If you want to dive deeper into this fascinating era, I highly recommend checking out David McCullough's brilliant book, 1776, or Thomas Paine's original pamphlet, Common Sense. If you prefer watching, check out the fantastic HBO miniseries John Adams, the AMC series Washington Spies, or blockbuster films and musicals like The Patriot and Hamilton. They really bring the incredible human element of all this history to life. Which leaves us with this final thought. A fragile, underfunded, underdog alliance of 13 colonies somehow managed to defeat the greatest military power on Earth, not just to change rulers, but to invent an entirely new system of government. It's a 250-year-old experiment in democracy that quite literally shifted the axis of the globe. As we look at the world today, how will this bold experiment continue to shape human history moving forward? It's definitely a profound question to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I will see you on the next one.